Have you ever trusted someone completely, to the point where you thought betrayal was impossible? Well, I did. And I paid the price. My name is Nia Campbell. I'm 28 years old, living in the bustling heart of Melbourne, Australia. The city is alive outside my apartment window, a continuous wave of noise, chatter, and traffic that never seems to stop. Yet, despite the endless hum of city life, there's a silence in my apartment, a stark contrast to the storm that rages inside me. The world outside may seem calm, but within, I feel like everything I once trusted has shattered. It wasn't until recently that I realized how fragile trust really is. How delicate and fleeting it can be. How easy it is to believe in someone, only to have it all ripped away in the blink of an eye. Let me take you back to when everything started. When everything seemed so perfect. It began with Lola. She wasn't just a neighbor, she was my best friend. We lived in Fitzroy, a trendy neighborhood full of history and charm, filled with art and culture. I'd moved into my apartment about 2 years ago, and right from the start, Lola was the person I turned to. We lived on the same street, our places just a few meters apart. From the moment we met, there was this unspoken connection, something that made me feel like I'd known her for years. We had an instant bond, a bond that was too real, too raw to ignore. We shared everything, from our childhood secrets to our deepest dreams. We had these late-night talks that would stretch until the sun started to rise. The type of conversations that felt intimate, like no one else in the world could understand us the way we did. In those early days, I didn't question anything. Lola was there for me in ways I could never have imagined. She was my shoulder to lean on when I needed it most, especially after I lost my job in Sydney. I was struggling, but Lola was there to help me pick up the pieces. I remember feeling overwhelmed by everything falling apart, but Lola never made me feel weak. She made me feel strong, like I could still make something of myself. She understood my struggles, my ambitions. In her, I found someone who really got it. But now, as I sit here in my apartment, staring out at the city skyline, I realize how easy it is to be blinded by someone's kindness. How easy it was for Lola to manipulate me. Let me ask you, have you ever trusted someone so completely, only for them to betray you in ways you never thought possible? What would you do if someone you loved and considered family suddenly turned everything you had against you? What would you do if someone you thought you could count on for life became the one who tried to destroy you? The first signs of trouble were subtle. You wouldn't even notice them at first. They were the kind of things that you'd brush off, thinking it was just a coincidence or misunderstanding. The first whispers reached my ears as little fragments of conversation from people I barely knew. They were small things, comments that made my stomach churn. "Nia's selfish," one person had said, a casual remark that had no real weight at the time. "She never helps anyone," another voice had added. I had heard these things before, but I never gave them much thought. Gossip was just that, gossip. It was easy to ignore. But then the whispers grew louder, and I began to notice the shift. Friends I'd known for years began looking at me differently. I'd see them glance at me, then look away quickly. I'd hear my name mentioned in the background, followed by hushed voices and the sound of doors closing before I could enter. "Nia doesn't care about anyone. She's only out for herself." Those words stung like an unexpected slap. Didn't make sense. Why would Lola say these things? Why would she turn the people closest to me against me? At first, I didn't believe it. I thought it was just a misunderstanding. Lola was my best friend. She wouldn't do that to me. Right. But the lies kept growing. Slowly, like poison in my bloodstream, they spread further. And what hurt the most was that the people I considered friends, people who'd been in my life for years, began believing those lies. Lola was a master at manipulation. She knew how to plant seeds of doubt in people's minds, how to turn friends against me. And I didn't even see it happening. She wasn't just lying about me to my face. She was crafting a story, building an image of me that was so different from the person I truly was. It wasn't until Tara came to my door that I began to truly understand the depth of the betrayal. Tara had been Lola's close friend for years. She was someone who'd been in Lola's inner circle, someone I thought I could trust. But what Tara told me changed everything. Tara looked at me, her eyes filled with guilt and hesitation. "Nia," she said, her voice shaky. "I need to talk to you. I need to say something I should have said a long time ago." Her words caught me off guard. Tara had always seemed loyal. She had been the one to stand by me during some of the toughest moments in my life, but now she looked like a stranger. "Lola told me, she told me you were selfish. That you didn't care about anyone. She said you were a bad person." Froze. I could feel my heart drop to my stomach, the pain of betrayal sinking in. Tara continued, her voice barely above a whisper. And I believed her. The words hit like a bullet. My mind raced, trying to process what Tara was saying. But then she added the one thing that would change everything. "But the more I got to know you, Nia, the more I realized it was all lies. She lied about you. And I'm so sorry I didn't see it sooner." Tara's confession was like a knife twisting in my gut. My heart felt heavy, but the rage bubbling inside me was even more intense. It wasn't Tara I was angry at. It was Lola. Lola had used me, manipulated me, and then poisoned the people I loved against me. Let me ask you again. What would you do if someone you loved used their lies to turn your life upside down? The days following Tara's confession were a blur of anger, confusion, and disbelief. It wasn't just the fact that Lola had manipulated my friends and turned them against me. It was the realization that the very foundation of everything I thought I knew had been shattered. The lies she had woven about me, the stories she told behind my back, were like venom that spread through the veins of my world. But the most painful part wasn't just the betrayal. It was the loss of a bond one had cherished. The closeness I had with Lola felt so real, so unbreakable, yet it had all been an illusion. The woman I had confided in, shared my dreams and fears with, had never truly been my friend. I couldn't understand why she'd done it. What had I done to deserve this? What was her endgame? Tara's words echoed in my mind. "She lied about you. And I'm so sorry I didn't see it sooner." But it wasn't Tara I was angry with. It was Lola. My heart burned with betrayal as I thought back to the countless times Lola had been there for me. All the times I had leaned on her. How could she have lied to my face, knowing what I was going through? How could she destroy everything I had worked so hard to build? It was then that the idea of revenge began to creep into my thoughts. But revenge wasn't about striking back in the moment. No, it was about something much more dangerous. It was about waiting, watching. And when the time came, taking everything from her, just as she had done to me. My mind raced. I needed to gather information. I needed to know exactly how far Lola had gone. Who else had she poisoned with her lies? The thought of confronting her head-on was tempting, but I knew better. She was too manipulative, too skilled in the art of deception. Confronting her might not yield the satisfaction I sought. It might only make things worse. No, I needed to outsmart her. I needed to play the long game. Began digging. Every conversation I had with mutual friends, every casual remark that seemed innocent enough, I paid attention. Little by little, the pieces of Lola's manipulation began to fall into place. I learned things I never would have suspected. How she had turned people against me slowly, how she had planted seeds of doubt in their minds, and how she had used every opportunity to twist the truth to her advantage. But it wasn't just her words that had hurt me. It was the silence. The silence of the people who knew the truth but never spoke up. They had all allowed her to get away with it. And now I was the one left to pick up the pieces. They were just as guilty as she was. But Lola, she was the mastermind. She was the one who had orchestrated everything, pulling the strings from behind the scenes, watching as my world crumbled without ever lifting a finger. But one thing I knew for sure. This wasn't over. The thought of confronting Lola directly still lingered, but I realized it wouldn't give me the closure I craved. She would spin the story to her advantage. She would make herself the victim, as she always did. So I decided to take a different approach. If I was going to take her down, I had to be smart. I had to play the game by her rules and outwit her at her own game. I started with the small things. Gathering information. Making connections. poking holes in the story she had told everyone. Slowly but surely, the pieces began to fall into place. But every step forward felt like a small victory, and yet it didn't satisfy me. The rage inside me was still there, simmering beneath the surface, just waiting for the right moment to explode. I began to think about what she valued the most. What was her weakness? It didn't take long to figure out. Lola's biggest fear wasn't being exposed, it was being abandoned. She thrived on the approval and admiration of others. She needed people to believe in her, to love her. Without that, she was nothing. That's where I would hit her the hardest. The next time I saw her, I wouldn't confront her with anger or accusations. No, I would confront her with the truth. The truth that her world was built on lies. I would make her face the reality of what she had done to me, and to everyone else. The more I thought about it, the more I realized this wasn't just about revenge. It was about taking back my power. It was about reclaiming the control she had stolen from me. She thought she could break me, but she was wrong. I wasn't going to let her. I wasn't going to let anyone take away my strength. What would you do if the person you trusted the most turned everything against you, making you question every relationship you've built? At this point, I had made my decision. There was no turning back. The war between Lola and me was far from over. It was just beginning. The days that followed were a blur of plans, observations, and the subtle tension that had woven itself into every corner of my life. I knew the stakes now, and I wasn't going to let Lola continue to pull the strings. It was time for her to face the consequences of her actions. I started by getting closer to her inner circle, people I had once considered my friends but now realized were pawns in her game. There was Amy, a quiet, reserved woman who had been a mutual friend before all the drama started. I reached out to her first, pretending like nothing had changed, but inside I was calculating my every move. I could sense she was uncomfortable, unsure of where to place her loyalty, but I pushed her to open up. What I discovered shocked me to my core. Lola had been feeding lies to Amy, just as she had to everyone else. The story was always the same. Nia was selfish, manipulative, and not the person everyone thought she was. It was almost like Lola had created a character, a version of me that didn't exist. But this time I saw the cracks. Amy was beginning to doubt Lola's words. She had already witnessed Lola's manipulative tendencies but hadn't been willing to confront it until now. I could feel the shift in the air between us. Amy was starting to question the truth, but she wasn't ready to fully trust me. Not yet. I knew the only way to get Amy on my side was to show her the real Lola, the person who had used me, betrayed me, and turned her friends against me. I didn't need to say anything. I just needed her to see Lola for who she truly was. It wasn't long before Lola made her next move. She tried to call me, desperate, asking if we could meet. She seemed genuinely worried, as though she had no idea I had already started unraveling her web of lies. This was the moment I had been waiting for. I agreed to meet, knowing full well she was walking right into my trap. I wanted to confront her face to face, but I wasn't going to let her control the narrative. This time I would be the one holding the cards. The cafe where we met was crowded, noisy, almost too busy to notice the tension building between us. She looked the same, polished, confident, like the Lola I had once known. But now everything about her seemed fake. The smile, the casual tone of her voice, it was all a performance. I could feel her trying to read me, sensing that something was off, but she had no idea how much I had already figured out. "Nia," she began, her voice too calm, too measured. "I've been thinking about everything, and I just want to say I'm sorry. I didn't mean for things to get this far. I never wanted to hurt you." I didn't react. I didn't even blink. I had learned long ago that Lola's apologies were just another form of manipulation. This wasn't about her owning up to her mistakes. It was about saving face. I leaned in closer, my voice steady, calm. "You know, Lola, it's funny. I used to believe you. I thought you were my best friend, that we were in this together. But now I see what you really are." Her smile faltered for a moment, just a fraction of a second, but it was enough. That was the first crack I had seen in her armor. You've turned everyone against me, I continued, my voice growing sharper. You've lied about me, manipulated my friends, and for what? To make yourself feel powerful. To tear down the person who was always there for you. Her eyes widened. She was caught off guard. I had no intention of letting her off easy. I needed to show her that I was no longer the naive woman who trusted her every word. I don't know what you're talking about, she said, her tone defensive. But there was an edge of panic in her voice now. She knew the walls were closing in. I don't think I need to explain it to you, Lola, I said, letting the silence stretch between us. You've already done the damage. I'm not the one who's going to pay for your lies. And with that, I stood up, leaving her stunned and speechless, just like I had wanted. I wasn't afraid of her anymore. I wasn't afraid of her lies, her manipulation, or the people who blindly followed her. She had underestimated me, and I was done being her victim. The next few days were a whirlwind. I could feel the tension building as I prepared for the final confrontation with Lola. I had already made my move, exposing her lies to Amy, confronting her in person, but there was still one last piece of the puzzle to complete. I needed to take back my life, take back my power. I gathered the evidence. Text messages, photos, overheard conversations, all the things I had collected over the past few weeks. I knew it wasn't enough to just confront Lola anymore. I needed to make sure everyone else saw her for who she truly was. I couldn't let her walk away unscathed, pretending to be the victim when she had been the one pulling the strings all along. The time had come to expose her once and for all. I called a meeting with everyone involved. The mutual friends, the ones who had turned their backs on me because of Lola's lies. The cafe where we met was the same one where I had confronted her. This time I wasn't there to make peace. I was there to end the game. As they gathered around the table, Lola walked in, her face a mask of calm confidence. But I could see the unease in her eyes. She knew this was coming. She knew I wasn't going to let her manipulate me anymore. I stood up, looked around at everyone in the room, and then I turned to Lola. You've lied to all of us, I said, my voice carrying the weight of the truth. You've turned us against each other, manipulated us, and for what? So you could feel in control. Well, it's over. The room fell silent as I began to present the evidence. Everything Lola had said, everything she had done to twist the truth. It was like watching a slow-motion train wreck as Lola's facade crumbled before everyone's eyes. I don't know what you're talking about, Lola stammered, her confidence slipping away. But I could see it now, the fear in her eyes. She was losing control. In that moment I realized something. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about reclaiming my dignity, my peace, and my sense of self. Lola had tried to break me, but I wasn't broken. And I wasn't going to let her win. The room erupted into chaos as everyone processed what had just happened. Some of them were shocked, others angry. But in the end, they all saw Lola for who she truly was. And for the first time in months, I felt the weight on my shoulders begin to lift. The war wasn't over, but I had won the first battle. As I walked out of the cafe, I didn't look back. The sun was setting over Melbourne, and for the first time in a long time I felt free. The days that followed the confrontation were a mix of relief and chaos. On one hand, I felt a weight lifted from my shoulders. I had done what I set out to do. I had exposed Lola for the manipulator she was. I had finally taken back control of my life. But on the other hand, there was the fallout to contend with. People I once called friends were now drifting away, unsure of who to trust. Some of them sided with Lola, unable to accept the truth about her. Others were simply too embarrassed to face me, knowing they had believed her lies for so long. Amy, to her credit, came to me first. She apologized profusely, admitting that she had been blind to Lola's deceit. But the damage had already been done. The friendship we had was never going to be the same. The trust that once existed between us had been shattered in the same way that Lola had shattered my world. It was hard for me to reconcile the person I had once considered a friend with the one who had been complicit in my downfall. Amy wasn't the only one who had fallen under Lola's spell. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that Lola had played the same game with everyone, spinning webs of lies until she had the entire group wrapped around her finger. But I had no time to dwell on that. The real problem was Lola herself. She was furious. She had tried to destroy me, and I had fought back in a way she hadn't expected. She had underestimated me, and now she was scrambling to pick up the pieces of her broken world. But the most dangerous thing about Lola was her ability to manipulate people. Even in the wake of everything that had happened, she still had a few allies left. People who hadn't been at the cafe that day. People who hadn't seen the truth. And I knew she was plotting her next move. I spent the next few weeks laying low, keeping to myself, making sure I didn't give her any ammunition to use against me. But it wasn't just about staying out of her way. It was about preparing for the inevitable next step. Lola was not someone who took defeat lightly. I could feel the storm brewing, and I knew that soon enough I'd be facing her again. This time, however, I wasn't going to let her have the last word. As predicted, Lola's retaliation came quickly. One afternoon, I received an anonymous message from someone who claimed to have information about a plan Lola was setting in motion. It was vague, but the message was clear. Lola was trying to make me out to be the villain once again. She was spreading more lies, building new stories, and using people who still believed her to turn my friends against me once more. This time I couldn't just wait for the truth to come out. I needed to act quickly and decisively. I reached out to Tara, the one person who had seen through Lola's lies and was still willing to talk to me. She agreed to meet, though her tone was cautious. I knew she was still unsure about the whole situation, but I couldn't afford to let the doubt linger. "We need to gather evidence," I told Tara. She nodded, though it was clear she was conflicted. "But how? We don't have anything concrete yet." "I'll get it," I said. "I've learned from the past. This time I'm not going to let her twist things. We need something irrefutable." We spent the next several days gathering every scrap of information we could find. Text messages, social media posts, even overheard conversations. Anything that could point to Lola's manipulation. Slowly we pieced together the puzzle. But as we did, I realized something even more dangerous. Lola had been planning this for months. It wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about her control. She was a puppet master, and I had been her target. By the end of the week we had a strategy. It wasn't foolproof, but it was enough to turn the tide. Lola had underestimated me before, and she would do so again. I just had to make sure I was ready when the storm hit. The day of reckoning arrived sooner than I expected. Lola, emboldened by the lies she had spread, came at me harder than ever. I had expected it, of course, but the intensity of her attack still took me by surprise. She had mobilized her remaining supporters, turning them into an army of misinformation, each person ready to destroy what little was left of my reputation. It was like a battlefield, only instead of weapons we wielded words. Lola had taken to social media, rallying her followers with carefully crafted stories that painted me as the villain in a twisted narrative. But this time I was prepared. I had my evidence. I had proof that Lola had been behind the lies all along. I reached out to everyone who had supported her. Some of them still hesitated, torn between the two of us. But others, those who had been on the edge, started to see the truth. Slowly, I began to turn the tide. The more I revealed, the more cracks appeared in Lola's carefully constructed facade. It wasn't easy. It wasn't quick. But bit by bit, the truth started to seep through the cracks. Lola's empire of lies began to crumble. When the dust finally settled, there was no grand victory, no sweeping triumph. What remained was a world that had been irreparably altered by the lies, the betrayal, and the damage caused by Lola. But for me, it was enough to know that I had taken control. I had fought back against the darkness she had tried to spread, and I had won. The days following the showdown were filled with a strange sense of quiet. The chaos that had once consumed my life had momentarily settled, but the damage was far from undone. People I had once trusted, people who had fallen under Lola's spell, now saw things differently, but the cost was heavy. The friendships that were left were tarnished, and even those who supported me felt a distance, as if the events of the past months had left an unspoken rift between us. Amy tried to reconnect, but her attempts felt hollow. She apologized again and again, but it didn't change the fact that the foundation of our friendship had been shattered. There was a sadness in her eyes that I couldn't ignore. I had wanted to believe in her, but trust, once broken, was a fragile thing. Tara was the one who truly understood the weight of it all. She had stood by me, had fought alongside me in ways that many hadn't. She was my anchor in a storm that had nearly torn everything apart. But even with her by my side, there was a lingering emptiness that I couldn't shake. Lola had, in her own twisted way, given me a gift. She had forced me to confront the fragility of my relationships, the ease with which people could be manipulated. But she had also given me the strength to rebuild, to learn that true friendships don't fall apart just because of a single battle. They weather the storms if they are built on the right foundation. It wasn't just my personal life that had been altered. I could see the ripple effect Lola's actions had caused in the group. Some had drifted away from both of us, too ashamed to be caught in the crossfire. Others had sided with Lola, their loyalty to her unwavering despite the truth. The fallout was not just mine to bear. It was something the whole group had to reckon with. But life went on. I started to piece things together again, slowly, carefully. It was a quiet rebuilding process, one that I knew would take time. And while Lola might have won a few battles, I had already won the most important war. My sense of self. That no one could take from me. As time passed, I learned to adapt to the new normal. It wasn't easy. The echoes of what had happened still lingered, but I started to see things from a new perspective. The world I once knew, the friendships I thought were solid, had all been tested, and many had fallen apart. But there were also new people who came into my life, people who understood the importance of loyalty and truth. It was strange at first, this sense of starting over. I had once felt so connected to the world around me, but now there was a distance. I couldn't let go of the lessons Lola had taught me, no matter how painful they were. I had learned to trust fewer people, to guard my heart more carefully, and to value those who had proven their loyalty. The hardest part was facing the fact that things would never be the same. Amy and I never fully repaired our relationship. It was as if we were both stuck in the past, unable to move forward, each of us holding on to a version of the other that no longer existed. But there were other relationships, new friendships that I found in the quiet aftermath. Tara remained my constant, and that was enough. I also realized that Lola, in a twisted way, had done me a favor. She had forced me to grow, to evolve. I had learned the value of self-reliance, the power of standing up for myself when no one else would. I had learned the importance of cutting ties with people who didn't deserve a place in my life. And while I couldn't erase the scars, I could live with them. I had learned to move forward, even if it meant walking alone sometimes. Looking back, I realize how much I've changed. The girl I was before Lola came into my life is a distant memory. I've become someone stronger, someone more aware of the complexities of human nature. But I'm also someone who knows how to protect myself, how to recognize when people aren't what they seem. Lola's shadow still looms over me, but it no longer holds power. I no longer fear her manipulation, no longer wonder what she's plotting behind closed doors. She had her chance, and she lost. I had beaten her at her own game, and in doing so, I had learned the most important lesson of all, that my strength doesn't come from others, it comes from within. As for Lola, I know she's still out there, still manipulating, still playing her games. But she's no longer my problem. She may still have her allies, but they won't be able to stop me anymore. The truth has a way of catching up with people, and Lola's lies will eventually catch up to her too. I've moved on, and while the scars remain, they don't define me. My life is mine now. I control my own narrative. And for the first time in a long time, I'm at peace with who I am and the person I've become. It wasn't an easy journey, but it was worth it. And if I ever see Lola again, I won't flinch. I'll stand tall, knowing that I've already won. The chapter is closed. As I settled into my new normal, I began to understand something that had eluded me for so long, the importance of self-worth. I had spent so much of my life seeking validation from others, from people who were not worthy of my trust, from people who would never see me for who I truly was. But through everything Lola had put me through, I had found a strength within myself that I hadn't even known existed. It was a quiet kind of strength, one that didn't demand attention or approval. It was the kind of strength that was forged through pain, through loss, and through learning how to rise again after being knocked down. It was the strength to walk away from people who no longer served a purpose in my life, the strength to say goodbye without guilt, and the strength to keep moving forward even when it felt like the world was pulling me backward. I learned that I didn't need anyone's approval to feel good about myself. I didn't need the approval of a manipulative ex-friend, nor did I need the approval of people who had chosen to believe the lies. I had my own approval, and that was more than enough. The realization wasn't sudden, nor was it easy. It came slowly, like a whisper that turned into a roar. I began to embrace my flaws, my mistakes, and the scars that made me who I was. I wasn't perfect, but I was enough. And for the first time in a long time, I felt a deep sense of peace. The constant chaos that Lola had brought into my life was gone, and in its place was something far more valuable: inner peace. Now that I understood my own worth, I focused on rebuilding the pieces of my life that had been shattered. The friendships that had been lost couldn't be revived, but there were new connections to be made, new people to trust. I started to surround myself with people who saw me for who I was and not who I could be manipulated into becoming. It wasn't just about friendships. It was about building a life that was authentic, a life that wasn't dictated by the lies of others or the fear of betrayal. I began to explore new passions, new hobbies, and new possibilities. The world outside of Lola's influence was vast and open, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had a future. The rebuilding process wasn't without its challenges. There were moments when I felt lost, moments when I questioned whether it was all worth it. But those moments were fleeting. They were reminders that rebuilding wasn't easy, but it was necessary. And as each day passed, I found myself stronger, more resilient, and more determined to live the life I had always dreamed of. I started to invest in my own growth, taking classes, meeting new people, and challenging myself in ways I never had before. The more I pushed myself, the more I realized that I wasn't defined by my past. I was defined by what I chose to do in the present, and what I chose to become in the future. With the rebuilding came a sense of renewal. It wasn't just about recovering from the past. It was about creating something new, something better. I had faced down the demons of betrayal, manipulation, and fear, and I had come out on the other side stronger and more self-assured. The new chapter in my life wasn't just about reclaiming what I had lost. It was about embracing the future with open arms. I had learned the hard way that trust was earned, not given freely, and I had learned that the people who truly mattered were the ones who stood by me when it counted. There were still moments of doubt, moments when I questioned whether I was doing the right thing. But those moments became fewer and farther between as I continued to make choices that aligned with who I was, not who others wanted me to be. I found myself letting go of the fear of what might happen next. The future was no longer something to fear. It was something to embrace. I had already survived the worst, and now I was ready to thrive. As I look back on everything that has happened, I see the journey for what it truly was. A lesson in resilience, self-worth, and revenge. Lola had tried to destroy me, to twist my world into something unrecognizable. She thought she had the upper hand, but in the end she was no match for me. I didn't just survive. I fought back and I won. The battles were never just with Lola, they were with myself. I had to shed the girl who let others dictate her worth, the one who believed that manipulation and deceit were her only options for survival. But that girl is gone now. She died the moment I decided to stand up for myself. I realized that revenge, in the end, wasn't about hurting Lola back in the same way she had hurt me. It was about regaining control over my life, reclaiming my peace, and proving to myself that I was stronger than any betrayal. In the aftermath, as I pieced my life back together, I felt an overwhelming sense of satisfaction. The weight Lola had placed on my shoulders for so long had finally been lifted. I had faced her with courage, and I had come out victorious. The world had seen the truth, my truth. No longer would I be the victim of her lies, her manipulations, or her schemes. But the real revenge wasn't just the collapse of Lola's empire. It was the way I rose from the ashes of it all. I had become someone who no longer feared retribution. I had become the kind of person who controlled her own destiny, who chose her own path. I didn't need to get even with Lola anymore because I had already surpassed her. As for Lola, she was left in the ruins of her own deception. She might have once had the power to control the narrative, but not anymore. The truth had set me free, and it was something that even Lola's scheming couldn't take away. She would always be trapped in her own web of lies, while I had escaped to something better. But even as I closed this chapter of my life, I realized something important. Revenge isn't always about making the other person suffer. It's about owning your own story, taking back control, and walking away unscathed, knowing that you've learned from the experience. Lola had tried to ruin me, but in the end, I was the one who came out on top. And that, in itself, was the sweetest revenge of all. So what do you think? Have you ever experienced something similar? A betrayal that changed you forever? How did you take back control? Let me know in the comments. If you enjoyed this journey of revenge and redemption, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and like this video for more stories of triumph and payback. Share your thoughts, and let's keep the conversation going.